Welcome back to Varnadore Films. I'm your host, Seth Varnadore, and I am joined this week by a special guest. If you're not following him on Twitter and you're a Florida fan, you need to be. The man, the myth, the mustache, Bud Davis is here. And Bud always does a great job with the numbers and bringing a different perspective and on Florida and always has really good stuff. So if you're not following him on Twitter, you need to make sure you're doing that. Bud, how are you doing this evening?
Pretty good. It's midweek and it's been a good week, and don't have to watch the Gators lose to anybody this weekend, so it's kind of
Yeah,
nice. Weather cooled down. It's been a nice day. I was working outside today. It was great.
there you go. Unfortunately, we only seem to talk when things are going poorly. I think the last time we talked was in the middle of the kind of recruiting doldrums this summer. I think this is post the Rashada whiff and all of that turmoil. Things have seemed to turn around quite a bit. What have your impressions been kind of since then? Since we haven't talked to you in a while, so we're kind of on the recruiting side, and then the start of the season here.
Yeah, recruiting has been like the back half has been really impressive. Like you look where we were in June, and we weren't set up that well, and now we finished really strong. We're in it for a lot of guys. I think a lot of people are really feeling really strong about Cormani McLean, who's going to announce next week, and that would just be an elite pickup. Obviously, you try and get an idea of where you need to be to ultimately meet your goals, which I think for Florida is to win a championship, and we'd like to be kind of on the plus side of 280. So we want to be pushing 285 and above, especially in this year too. Um, ultimately the closer you're getting to 300, the better your odds are. But, if we can be at 285 plus this year, I think that sets you up really nicely. And I think that's totally reasonable with how we've closed. I think the main thing I like to kind of keep in mind, and it varies per recruit, is we're not going to land all the guys that we're in it for. You're probably going to get about a third of them. And I think as long as you keep that in mind, you can kind of project out where we might end up, and hopefully we should feel really good by early signing day. So
Yeah, I think the last time we spoke, 280 was it was kind of like if you could get to 280, you'd feel a little bit better. And now it's pushing a little bit higher, so that's good to see. What
yeah,
have you thought kind of on the field? Just initial impressions of new schemes, players, and new stuff. What's been your thought so far this year of kind of the on the field product?
yeah, I thought, you know, always have low expectations in year one of a coach. And number one is it's not very predictive. And I think Florida fans should know this. Like we watched Mac, Grantham, Mullen, like we've seen year ones not really turn into sustainable success. Um, and you see that across college football. And so you have to adjust some expectations. And I think for me, the measuring stick for like what's going to make Napier successful is in year 3 and 4, are we competitive in Jacksonville? Are we pushing for a bid to Atlanta? Are we pushing for a college football playoff berth in year 3 and 4? And like when you kind of take that mindset, I think you can ignore a lot of the bad in year one because it hasn't been great. I mean, we've lost close games, we've been blown out, we've been had problems on both sides of the ball, we've been up and down. But for me, I would just caution: don't read too much into the on-field product of any year one coach, um, and especially it looks like the defensive side of the ball. It's so much harder in today's game, and like we can look at a couple figures, but like um, year one coaches, it's so hard to get a defense going, especially if there's a scheme change like we've seen. So
Yeah, it's been comforting to see. I know you've been talking about it on the Gators Breakdown Discord, and I think even on Twitter, just how some of these other guys that are considered like the top defensive minds in the country, Dan Lanning, Brent Venables, have gone into situations where you think, oh, they're just going to instantly upgrade the defense. They're going to be awesome. And that has not been the case thus far. So even on teams that have, the on paper talent, Oklahoma and Oregon both pretty high, have some talented players. It does take some time if you're doing things differently.
yeah,
So it certainly seemed. I think the the first game was almost a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing you won because you've been had some tight games since, but I think it ramped up expectations really high into thinking this team was going to be something they're not. I always thought this was like a 7-8 win team, but after that Utah game, everyone's like, I see 11 wins on the schedule, only Georgia. It's like, all right. So I think those have been reset a little bit recently, but um, yeah, it's been an up and down start, that's for sure. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. So you've got numbers kind of for the whole team here. So we're going to kind of go through and look at some stuff. Kind of, we're not just a little bit past the halfway point here in the season, but 6 FBS games. So I think a pretty good stopping point. We were going to talk last week. Uh, we decided to wait. I think the tenor of our conversation would have been totally different, totally different last week. It would have been, they gutted one out against Mizzou. They'll be good. I'm sure the defense will be fine. Didn't quite turn out that way. So, but I think now's a good time to look back. We're on the bye week. We're doing our own quality control, just like Coach Napier and the staff here. So let's put some stuff up here. You got some great numbers and stuff to look at, kind of regarding the team in a bunch of different ways. So I'm going to kind of let you take the driver's seat here and take the wheel and throw it up here. Let me see. Do I have to add it? Here we go.
How's that? Is that coming through?
Yes.
All right, cool. So one of the first things like I just wanted to show is this chart, which is EPA per play. So this is just on any play. Are you adding more expected points? Are you getting more likely to score on that play? And then it's opponent adjusted. So this looks at who you've played and it does some math and it tries to kind of weigh how good the defense is you played and come up with a number. And so good teams plot in this top right corner. And so they're good offenses. Teams like Ohio State, Tennessee, Kansas, they've got good offenses. And then there's good defenses like Alabama and Illinois and Iowa. And really, we want to be up here. And, that really good Florida 2020 team was kind of in this range here where Michigan and Texas were. And Florida 2022 is down here in this quadrant with slightly above average offense and slightly below average defense. And I think that pretty much passes the eye test with what we've seen. Although I think some people wish our offense was a lot further to the right. But in general, I think one thing that you can kind of notice is, we're next to Oklahoma. We're next to guys like Brett Venables, where they've had a coaching change. Oregon, similar defense. We've played some, good offenses. Tennessee, LSU's actually got a pretty decent offense. Same with Utah. We haven't played a bunch of scrubs. Mizzou, not great. Kentucky, not great. And those have been our wins. We've really struggled against the good offenses. And I think the problems are, we've got Georgia, we've got FSU left on the schedule. Hopefully A&M can be a W. Same with South Carolina. But there's a lot of first-year head coaches, and there's not many that have an above-average defense, a defense, that's kind of pulled away from the pack. And I think that's just kind of telling how complex a pass defense you need in modern college football to sustain yourself. Obviously, Illinois is kind of an exception, and Iowa too. We can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, but we were talking off air. Now I think Iowa's they're going. You'll find out more about Iowa's pass defense this weekend. But for Illinois, we were talking before we came on. Everyone's kind of like they're the darling. They're playing a ton of cover one. Why doesn't Florida do that? Who's the best passing offense Illinois has played this year? They have not played a team kind of on that Tennessee level. That's for certain. So I think you got to take some of this with these are opponent adjusted. But in terms of style, just they played Wyoming, Indiana, Virginia, UT Chattanooga, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota.
Yeah.
This is not exactly the Mike Leach air raid tree, right?
Right. And the adjustment can only, do so much. They've played good defense all year.
Yeah.
It's not going to send them flying across the board by design. But, they've played well. But I'm not going to be betting on Illinois to beat Michigan.
No, I don't think so. I think though they're tough, but it's just I think with that seems to be a team people are really going to, and you can see it here. You've gone to the defense opponent adjusted and their EPA, and they're way out there.
Yeah, their passing defense has been great, and for like people who don't know, they basically just spam cover one man, and it's working great for them.
Which, like we said, is somewhat benefited by the style and the teams they're playing. Would they be this successful and this effective if they had to play Tennessee or if they had to play Cam Rising at quarterback?
Yeah.
They've kind of the best quarterback they've played is Brennan Armstrong, who's kind of been really almost his effectiveness has been kind of cut out at the knees this season compared to last year. So.
Yeah, I think one thing I kind of wanted to point out here is Florida's in this bad rushing defense, bad passing defense. I don't think people need a chart to tell them that we've been bad against both. But I think it is helpful to kind of see in the context, like, some numbers you can look at. Florida's the worst defense in the country, and we're certainly not a good defense. You do the opponent adjustment, we're still in this terrible quadrant with teams like UMass, Kansas, Nebraska, UConn. But we're also down there with, your Oregons and your Oklahomas. And as far as scheme goes, like what we're running at Florida is similar to scheme to what Pete Golding's running at Alabama and Ron Roberts is running at Baylor. Like you can run the same scheme and get a lot of different performance. And that's going to have to do with your players. It will have to do with your play calls. It's going to have to do with your opponents. And I think that's just kind of people want to point a finger. And in year one, I think we don't have to dole out blame in the first year of a head coach's tenure. If we're still having this significant of problems in year two, that's a red flag for me. But year one, it's not too surprising to be down here.
Yeah, and if everyone kind of agrees before the season, this Napier guy seems really smart. And then every coach you talk to, this Toney guy is really smart. He's a superstar. Maybe let's give him more than 7 games to kind of get stuff together. My other thing, just looking at this, you look at the teams in this quadrant of basically bad defense, right? Florida has not really been blown out this year like some of these teams in that quadrant have. I think that is important. I think a lot of fans want to see them be more and more aggressive. I think they're making a stylistic choice to not be crazy aggressive, to try to keep themselves in these games as long as possible and give them a chance to win. So I think in their minds, that kind of somewhat maximizes the length they stay in a game. And you see that here. It's not like, the Texas beat down Oklahoma suffered or Colorado suffered quite a few.
Yeah.
Arkansas has gotten some, right? So it's not quite, even though they're in the same quadrant, Florida has not gotten totally blown out of a game yet. Everything's been pretty tight. LSU game, 10-point loss, notwithstanding. But I think that's part of the strategy. I think they're kind of want to get as much in as possible and win as much as possible this year too.
Yeah.
So maybe they're playing a little bit bend, don't break. But the issue is, right, when you play bend, don't break, you can't miss tackles. You can't bust coverages and give people wide open explosive plays, right? So there's some issues. They're having some issues, but I think that's the idea behind it. We don't want to get blown out. We want to try to stay in every game.
Right. And we've got some tough ones on our schedule, like Georgia, FSU. FSU's right behind this Utah logo. They've got good offenses, and, it would not surprise me. Those are our rivals. They're going to want to run up the score if they get a chance. And, we might have a blowout, especially if guys start checking out later in the season. Again, it's year one. You can only read so much into it, and we do not have to dole out blame, right, to players or coaches. That's kind of a futile exercise in year one. And I just, caution people before you go through that process of trying to figure out who to blame for something is if you even want to do it. So this is offense. And this is, Florida's had its struggles on passing offense. But our rushing offense, it has been really good. Especially opponent adjusted. We've got a really good rushing attack, which I think people can be really happy about, especially with our offensive line play.
And that's the kind of, to me, that's kind of the yin and yang of playing a bend don't break defense and trying to keep yourself in games. If you can lean on the run game, that can kind of help you shorten games too. So I think I'm really interested to see going forward, not this year, but in the years ahead. Does Napier stick with a lot of 12 personnel, or does he open it up a little bit more? Does he open up the passing game a little bit more? Is this kind of a year one thing to do what you can to maximize your ability to win this year? I know in the past he's been pretty run heavy, but he also has not had he's not going to have access to the talent he has at Florida. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see kind of how he kind of evolves from this season. So this year, I think they're doing what they can to win, and they're being effective. They're running the ball very effectively.
Right. And I think, we've talked about this, but like there are things that we could do to make our offense simpler or make our defense simpler. But, the ultimate goal is to win, be competing for a title, be an SEC title or a college football playoff berth in year 3 or 4. And simplifying things and not using this year to teach guys doesn't get you closer to that ultimate goal. And I do think our program is focused on, hey, let's do things the right way, process over results, especially year 1. And it does seem like we're running a pretty complex, especially defense, but offense as well.
Yeah, and I think, really, especially now, like once you're out of SEC championship contention, I think beyond beating rivals, an eighth win is not that much more different than a seventh win. If you win 7, but you're getting stuff in that you want to get in, whether you had to simplify it or toss it to get to 8 wins, does that really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Right.
In 2 years, if they're awesome, nobody's going to be like, man, I wish they won that 8th game that first year. They're going to be like, man, I'm glad they got everything in. That first year was a bumpy ride, but look where we're at now. So
right, exactly. Like we've got essentially 3 off seasons and 2 in seasons to install and instill all of the schemes we want. And then in that, 2024 season, have guys who are upperclassmen who have played multiple years in the same systems, who have developed, and that's how you actually win a title. You don't win a title by, changing out your coordinators every year or changing your scheme every season. That just makes it really difficult.
Yeah, and this is not. I think one thing that is going around that will go around is kind of the difference in Kirby year 2 had a team, and you see what Tennessee's doing right now.
Yeah.
These are not quite apples to apples situation, right? The last coach got fired because the talent level he was not bringing in the talent, right?
Right.
He didn't get fired just for simply on field. It's kind of a mix of things off the field. But the biggest gripe from the fan base was his ability to recruit and bring in elite level talent.
Yeah.
Those other 2 teams had some elite level talent. You see Tennessee's wide receiver room, and they brought some more guys in since Heupel's got there, but their wide receiver room is insane.
Right. And I think, people, you can make all the comparisons you want. You want them to be apples to apples, and that can be done across college football. It can also be done, poorly. I think the main thing is look at our roster. What's a reasonable expectation from where the roster Napier inherited and the competition we have to play? What's a reasonable expectation to get to Atlanta? And I think, year 3, we can hopefully be competitive in Jacksonville, but I'm not expecting an SEC championship. Year 4, especially if we keep recruiting plus 285 classes, year 4, we should be very competitive for that. And actually be pretty hopeful for it. And I think, it's just about setting reasonable expectations.
Yeah, and that's something that can swing with especially now with the portal. That's something that could swing kind of, maybe could happen a little bit sooner, just based on luck in the portal and luck in some hitting and recruiting.
Yeah,
and like a young guy comes, like the Ole Miss running back Judkins just comes in as a stud, as a true freshman. Like that kind of stuff accelerates the timeline. But I think they are building a kind of a linear path forward to, we're going to get better and better and better. to unfortunately borrow a phrase from Ron Zook, get better and better, and continue moving forward until you get to that elite level.
Yeah. All right. So let's look at just, I wanted to put these charts together for offense and defense. I only got them for offense. So these are our personnel. These are what percent of offensive plays we use them on. This portion says, hey, if you use them this amount, if it's green, that means we use them a lot. We use them more than other offenses. If it's pink, we use them less. And then EPA per play, this is how successful they've been, where green is good, pink, purple is bad. So, you can see we've been predominantly 11, 12. So one running back, one tight end, one running back, two tight end. And we've not been great, a little bit better. We've been positive on offense with the 12 personnel, but generally just not great. This is from pre-Tennessee is when I ran these numbers, so we've had some change since then.
Yeah.
And my
Probably
SIS,
a little more positive.
yeah, so it should be a little bit. I think the main things are these relative usage. You can kind of see Napier's style, predominantly 11, a little bit run heavy, 2/3 no huddle, which is pretty plus. I don't think that's something I saw a lot talked about before Napier came in, that we do run pretty quick. A lot of shotgun, fair bit of motion, fair bit of RPO. So plus on those. And then just a lot of these design rollouts. These are these boot actions. We've seen those. We've been really successful on them this year. You see guys like Pearsall popping up where, we've targeted them a little bit more than you would see. You see the deficiencies that we've got with these outside receivers. You want guys like Shorter and Henderson to be working out, but you're just not getting the success there. Same with tight end. And then, running back targeting, I think we're probably in the negative here now.
Yeah, like you said, some of these have shifted in terms of EPA since then. But one thing I do think is interesting. I'm sure the usage by personnel is pretty similar. One thing that's interesting to me is, Dan Mullen was like an 89, 90+% 11 personnel team last year and has been for a while. And that's kind of the worst personnel grouping they have in terms of effectiveness. So that's kind of interesting. You're recruiting to this 11 personnel, and it's actually your worst personnel group so far in terms of effectiveness. So that if that's not another sign there, that something was amiss.
That's a tough one. Like Zipper's he's undersized. He's 6 foot. Like he's just not a very big tight end. He doesn't really excel in any one thing. He's pretty good run blocking, especially for his size. And then Xanders has changed positions enough that I don't think he's really gotten enough time there to excel.
And yet they're still more effective with those two guys on the field than taking one of them off and putting a receiver on. So
yeah. And I mean, that might be situational too, right? You're probably not running 12 personnel in your third and longs. But yeah, I mean, and then just, we've been pretty good at the gap runs. So with the pulling blockers, we've had success at those. We've done more zone, and we've been pretty good at that.
And I think you're going to start seeing some more gap runs too. They busted out a counter scheme. I think that's something you might see more going forward, especially if they decide that they're going to kind of let Richardson run a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think him in those counter schemes, reading the backside, can really do some damage. So that's something they busted out against LSU. They ran one in Lingard. I think that was a 9-yard gain after the false start. So I would imagine you'll see more of that going forward too.
Yeah. So I'll try and update these before the Georgia game. So here's an uglier version. The numbers are right, but we didn't get a nice, pretty chart.
Can you hit the hide at the bottom there at the sharing thing, just so we can see that they're perfect?
So this is for defense, and so the main things here are the EPA that's going to be associated with this, and then the percent of plays. So this is when we're on defense. Teams have tended to rush against us, and they've rushed really effectively. So pink bad, green good. We want negative numbers now. We're on defense. So we've been bad versus the rush, a little bit better versus the pass, but even then, still not great. Gotten killed by scrambles.
That tracks. That's one of those ones that definitely tracks with what you see.
Yeah, and I think it's important. These dropbacks actually include the sack EPA, which people always underestimate how important sacks are. And I don't know if these sack totals might not have gotten updated. I don't think from LSU. Usually they update them by Wednesday, and I kept waiting for it, and they didn't get all their numbers updated. So, but yeah, so these dropbacks do include that negative EPA from sacks. So, passing is risky. And blitz, I think, is interesting. Seth, we were talking about this. Like, this is something you and I think maybe we should do a little bit more of. We've been effective at it.
Yeah, I think especially if you you could be safe in blitz, but I do think bringing more pressure at times. I thought against Daniels, when they would get pressure in him, if you could contain him in the pocket, I thought you could affect him a little bit. And you saw when they were able to kind of get to him with the blitzer, his throws were way more erratic than when they just kind of let him sit back there in the pocket. I think they were really afraid of him breaking the pocket and running. You see the scrambling numbers up there. I think that's what they were kind of focused on early, and they let him get a little hot. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more, bringing some more pressure and doing some more kind of exotic stuff. But again, like if the guys aren't getting the basics, it's hard to get into the exotic stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting is they're kind of playing more man than you think, and probably blitzing more. I guess 27% is not a ton, but they are, I think, playing a little bit more man coverage. Everybody kind of feels like they're just playing soft zone all the time. They're playing a little bit more man than you think. It's just not been really effective.
Yeah. 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 I mean, our man and zone splits, man's a little bit more effective. We've played zone a little bit more. These percents are relative to all dropbacks. Not all dropbacks get charted as man's versus zone. So, if they throw a screen, you're probably not going to be able to figure out what coverage that was. Things like that. Or if the camera angle's bad and they don't have the all 22, they won't chart it. So that's why these don't add up to 100 necessarily. But we've had more zone than man. We've been a little bit better at man than zone, but we've been bad at both. Same with our middle of the field closed. We've tended to play more middle of the field closed than middle of the field open. So this is like your one high, your cover three. These are like, your quarters, cover two. And we've been bad at both, but we've been playing a lot of different coverages.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think can kind of I'm not absolve, but makes you feel a little bit better. It's not like they're coming out and playing the same exact thing every
Yeah.
time. Somebody told me last year that like Grantham had 100 different ways to get to the same coverage, so he's consistently playing a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
They're trying different things. Nothing's really working. I think they have. I think they have a lack of explosiveness on defense that kind of was more apparent when you watched LSU the other night. LSU's defense wasn't great, but they had some dudes on defense that, like, as soon as the quarterback breaks contain, they're on it. Like, they're just a little bit more explosive, and that I think helps you in the passing game, especially when your linebackers got to get out in coverage. LSU's linebackers were big, fast, explosive dudes. Florida's aren't quite. That's not quite their skill set, so they struggle a little bit more in coverage. So if you can't get pressure with 4 and you can't play man coverage, it kind of puts you in some tough spots.
Yeah. Then you look at, let's see, these percents. These ones got fudged here, but teams have run more zone on us than gap runs. We've been worse versus the gaps. So, man, this is something that's stuck with Florida for years now. Just these pulling guards and pulling blockers just eat our lunch.
Yeah, that's the USF ran counter 10 different. They ran so many gap schemes, and Florida still had problems with some guys closing and not just opening up the gate. I thought they've been getting a little bit better at it. They got a little bit unlucky. LSU, the big run to start the half was a counter scheme, I believe, and Florida fit up the counter part of it really well. I
Yeah.
was kind of pleased with that. I think Justice Boone has done a really good job as that
Mhm.
guy that kind of folds in that first blocker and kind of kills the counter. Unfortunately, it cut back, and then you missed like 5 tackles. But they played
Then
the front side of it well, which is an improvement.
for our actual personnel, we've been, mainly basing out of this 3-3-5. This is where Cox is called a linebacker per the charting. So they'll call it a 3-3-5. Been basing mainly out of that, and then with a mix of 4-2-5 and 3-4-4, kind of rounding it out. And we've been much better at kind of our more exotic personnels. Like outside of our base personnels, our defense has actually been a little bit better, particularly against the pass. But it does look like these are probably situational, and this base defense is struggling.
I wonder if that's a lot of Kentucky for that 3-4-4 look. So you Cox is considered a fourth linebacker. Did they bring in 3 guys? I can't remember. I thought in the first couple games they did bring in. They did play 3 linebackers at times. I thought
Yeah,
Utah and Kentucky. So
yeah,
Kentucky is probably the best defenses played all year. So
yeah. That might be doing it. Then when you actually look at light box, so the number of guys we got in the box, we've been basing out of a 6-man box, which is pretty much the norm across college football now, and have not been very good at that. And then teams, when they get us in these light box looks, so this is probably Tennessee a fair bit in here. They've really just pounded us, and even in heavy box situations. 7 box. So these might be, slight run tendency situations. We've been pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, just getting beat across the board.
yeah, and that tracks when you look at like the third and shorts and things like that, where they're giving up a high number of conversions in those. That would probably track more towards a heavy box look, right? Yeah, here.
Let's go to third down. Let's talk about the bad stuff.
Yeah, you can see right here the distance at the bottom, the conversion rate going up the y-axis there.
Yeah.
Yeah, these third and shorts have not been too generous. So that's if you're in those heavy box situations, that's probably that. Third and 2 does not look too kind.
Dude, 3rd and 2 just getting torn up. Third and 5 and 6 also just horrible. All right. So this was kind of something Seth and I were talking about. We were trying to figure out, like, obviously Florida's bad at third down. Is that a function of our third down distance, right? Are we just getting in a lot of third and shorts and converting those? Or, is it something else? And so you can look at a chart like this and it's pretty jagged. And so it's like, all right, we're bad at some of these third and shorts, but we're also pretty bad at these third and longs. So what you can do is take this red line, and that gives you an idea of what the conversion rate should be. So, like, you should only give up like 50% of your third and threes, and that's like roughly where we are. But you should give up 10% or 20% of your third and 14s, and we've given up 100. So if we take this expectation and compare it to what we've given up, where do we plot? So Florida's third down distance is actually pretty average for FBS, and then our conversion rate is terrible. So we're not teams like Arizona State that's given up a lot of third downs because they're in third and shorts. We're in third and average, and we're giving up a lot of third downs. And we can actually figure out how we're giving up almost 55% of our third downs. What percent should we be giving up? And it's something like 39%. And this 15% difference is higher than any other team in college football by a ton. Like almost nobody else is more than 10%. Like I think there's 5 teams that are over 10% and 10 teams that are over 7.5%. And we're at 15. So we're 10 worst teams. We're double as bad as number 10, which is crazy. And some of that's probably luck. Seth, you've looked at like the actual individual plays.
Yeah, there's some where I thought after the Missouri game, I wrote, let's not get too worried about third downs just yet. But because I thought there was things that were fixable. There was, a guy being overzealous covering the flat when he's got to understand, oh, it's 3rd and 15. I can get some depth here. I don't need to cover the 2-yard flat
Yeah,
throw. Don't take the bait in front of me, right? Last week, I thought there was. I think this kind of shows it a little bit. I don't think Florida's this bad on defense. Now, maybe they are, but this much of an outlier, right? There's probably a little bit of a luck element. And I thought Daniels threw the ball better than he had all year. Now, maybe, is that because he's a little bit more comfortable because you didn't get a lot of pressure on him? Could be. But I thought he threw the ball better than he had all year. The receivers caught everything. Even if he missed and it was back, shoulder, and high, they were catching it. Florida guys are playing through the hands. It doesn't matter. They're still coming down with the ball. So I think there's a little bit of bad luck you can chalk some of these up to. And I think being such a big outlier kind of shows that a little bit. But
yeah,
there still obviously needs to be better execution on a lot of these. But it's not totally that Florida is one of the worst third down defenses of all time or something. I think maybe we have a sample size issue. I don't know. It'll kind of work itself out as the season goes on. But I'm not an expert on those types of things. So
yeah. I mean, we've been okay at 1st and 2nd downs. Like if you look at our third down distances, our average third down distance, this is actually Alabama down here, right? We should have, somewhere in here, right? The difference between a terrible defense and one of the best defenses in the country is really this third down conversion rate, right?
I really expected the average distance to be. I thought, okay, maybe that's the issue. Maybe they're just bad on 1st and 2nd down, and the average distance is really short.
Yeah,
And that's because, as an offensive guy, that's where you're trying to stay ahead of the change, right? Get positive gains on 1st and 2nd down, give yourself easy third downs to convert. But 3rd and 7 is not an easy third down to convert.
no, I mean, and we've been playing pretty good on 1st and 2nd downs, and I think this kind of jives with the eye test for a lot of what we've seen is Florida just can't get off the field.
No, I
And
think
so
they're worse
hopefully
in the country in three and outs. I think they're
yeah. So I mean, hopefully we're just due for some positive regression. And if we're gonna have an unlucky season on defense, I'll take it in year one in a write-off year.
That's true. Yeah, that's the best. Let's get it out of the way now.
Yeah. So, see if we had anything else. I thought this was kind of going back to some of the defensive stuff we were talking about, but I like this one. We talked about, Illinois running a ton of man and they're running cover one. So they're running a lot of this middle of the field closed. And I think this chart just does a good job of showing, there's a lot of ways to get to good pass defenses. So green are good pass defenses, pink are bad. And you could see it's all over. You can be, playing a lot of cover two, like, Iowa, or I forget if they're quarters, I forget, but a lot of middle of the field open stuff like Iowa, or you can be like Illinois and play cover one man every time.
And
And
Iowa's just like a keep it in front of me. No
yeah,
big plays, work your way down the field. Illinois is like in your face the whole time, right?
yeah,
Totally opposite ends of the spectrum.
you could be a multiple defense like Florida, Alabama, Baylor, like, and get pretty different results. And really, it's just there's a lot of ways to get there. You don't fix the scheme by doing any one thing. You fix the scheme by playing better, coaching better. So, just kind of thought that was interesting.
Yeah, there's not one way. Despite the like run on trends in defense and offense where everybody's doing this type of thing. There's a lot of ways to win football games.
Yeah.
You just got to find out what fits your personnel best. So
Yeah.
I think Florida's still trying, and I think maybe it's part of it's the personnel trying to kind of figure out what can I do in this new scheme. It's a little bit of that first year syndrome, right? What do these guys do best? We only saw them in the spring against an offense that's learning a system for the first time ever, too. So it's not like we have a ton of information.
Right. Yep.
So
They've got one spring and summer, and now they're trying to put it together. Um, these were some numbers pre LSU that I thought were interesting. Just a few things to touch on for Florida. Our offense has been pretty decent, pretty explosive. A little better at rushing than passing. Uh, our offensive lines played pretty good. Limiting stuff, sacks, things like that. I think looking for um, Pearsall to get a little bit more usage, Richardson to rush a little bit more, running backs to catch a little bit more out of the backfield. Um, Henderson, I think he's probably bumped this up since the LSU game, but actually get some production to match his usage. Um, those are some things that have kind of stood out to me.
and the interesting thing about kind of where they are so far this year is, I think there's been a lot of kind of hand wringing about the play calling on offense, but offensively, as a former offensive coach, you're trying to score points, but you're trying to generate explosive plays.
Yeah,
And Florida has done a really good job this year generating explosive plays without, I would say, a ton of crazy explosive players. They've got a couple of guys, pretty explosive backs. Receiver room's not insanely explosive, but
no,
they've been
not
able to generate a ton of explosives with those guys. I think that kind of lends itself to thinking that's pretty good scheme, pretty good design. So
yeah,
that's something that when people complain about the play calling, I'm like, this is not this is not like 2019 LSU's receiver room here.
no,
They're
no,
doing a good job generating explosives with a quarterback that's kind of been a little up and down. I think he's starting to kind of find his level more recently, but especially
yeah,
early in the year, they were generating explosive plays at a pretty high rate, which is something that I wasn't sure they'd be able to do this year. And that the fact they are doing that kind of leads me to being some pretty good scheme, even though it's not probably everybody's preferred scheme. It's obviously working. They're able to generate these explosive plays pretty consistently.
yeah. I mean, I really love this balance. So, like, what you're trying to do is balance efficiency, so that's the success rate term, with explosiveness. And there's always a trade-off in your play calling between, an explosive route concept and an efficient one. So, curl flat, that's going to be an efficient passing route, right? That's going to help you move the sticks, but
Yeah.
it's not going to go for a touchdown very often versus like, Mills, you're throwing it deep like Spurrier, that's explosive. And we've got a pretty good balance of success and explosiveness, efficiency and explosiveness in our offense. And that's a healthy offense.
And the explosiveness can kind of make up for, like, the best offenses have both, but if you're kind of a middle of the road offense and you have that explosiveness, that can make up for a little bit of down to down issues,
Yeah.
because you can just pop one and
Yeah.
that'll kind of make up for it. So generating explosive, I think, is one of the most important things you can do as an offensive coordinator, and they're doing it.
Defense, we've been more prone to the efficiency. We're bad at efficiency, so teams are pretty efficient to us against us, and we've been about average at explosiveness. Um, been a little plus in takeaways, not turnovers. And then where we've been really bad is this front seven. We're not getting stuffs. We're not getting tackles for loss. We're not generating sacks. And then our DBs aren't generating pass breakups or interceptions at a high rate either. So you look at these Havoc stats, and we're really poor at that. And I think that probably goes into these third down, passing down situations. We've been really bad on those too. And I think all that just kind of combines to a lot of the mess we've seen. Um,
Yeah,
and I think we're at
if you can't get pressure with four, that puts some pressure on you defensively to do things that aren't unsound, but a little bit more risky. And then if you're not playing man coverage very well, and you're trying to bring pressure, well, that kind of you, you like to be able to do pretty well at one of those things. To
yeah,
not do well at either is a recipe for being really bad on third down.
yeah. And I mean, you look at the efficiency numbers for when teams rush against us. You know, they've got it easy running against our front seven. They can just do that every time and find success. and then, take a shot in the passing game and probably find success there. And, I do think next year I'm looking for our passing defense to take a step forward. I think my concern is that next year our front seven's just not going to be there. We're going to lose guys like Miller, probably Dexter, and I don't think we have the dudes to replace them. And we've got good young guys coming in, but those positions, DL, linebacker, those take a year or two to develop. And I'm worried that our front seven is going to be bad again in 2023.
Yeah, I fear you're gonna have to fight. You're just gonna have to fight tooth and nail in the portal to get some guys. That will, that's kind of the other side that I've seen some people start to talk about it now. But offensively, your best players are guys that Napier brought in.
Yeah.
Your most consistent players. I think Richardson's probably he's your most explosive player, your most talented player. He's not been your most consistent player in offense. You're talking about Torrance, Montreal Johnson, Etienne, Pearsall. Those would kind of be my top four. And those are all guys Napier brought in.
Right.
They didn't bring anybody in on defense or couldn't get anybody in on defense.
Yeah.
So I think we're kind of seeing that issue there. But I think you're going to have to try to augment the team with some portal additions to kind of give the young guys chances to get ready.
This was kind of a chart heading into LSU that I made, that shows some of this. These are certain stats you can look for. It's tough to figure out the best stat to judge a player by. But green is good is the short thing. You want 2 green bars. You don't want pink, purple, whatever. And this is a pretty good way to kind of get an idea of who's performing and where their strength and weaknesses are. So yeah, like you said, like guys like Montreal Johnson are just crushing it. Yeah. These explosive runs that he's putting up and his missed tackle rate, those are great. Torrance playing really good. Ethan White, Richard Garage playing really good. I think where we're struggling a little bit is this Anthony Richardson, these on-target throws. He's got a pretty low clip at that. Then you look at, our receivers actually have pretty decent targets per route. And then, we've been actually pretty good at the drops, but Henderson's not really been very explosive for us. Same with Xander's. Pretty good at the run blocking though. So overall, I mean, there's things to be happy about, but it is a patchwork offense. And I do like that, we're leaning on our strength, which is this run blocking, and our running back. We're trying to do what we do best.
Yeah, which I think is, I think that's kind of part of the plan for this year. They understand where they're best. Let's do that, and then reassess once we bring in some more guys.
Yeah, I think where we're having more of our problems is this defensive unit.
Not as much green on this side of the ball.
Not very much. Our linebackers, people complain about missed tackles. People always complain about missed tackles, but our linebackers and safeties have actually tackled pretty good. Our missed tackle stats are overall pretty good, outside of our D line, outside of our front seven, where our pressure rate and missed tackle rate is pretty bad on this D line. And then you look at our linebackers, they're just getting picked apart in the passing game. So these guys, not great at making tackles. Then, your next line of defense, your stars and your linebackers, just huge liabilities in the passing game. Your DBs additionally not your cornerbacks additionally not playing great in the passing game as well.
Yeah, and that's where if you want to start to get exotic defensively in terms of pressures and things like that, well, now maybe you're bringing in the star, you're bringing a corner. Well, now you got to put these backers in coverage, and that is not their strong suit, right? So I think they're trying to do as best as they can with the personnel, but it's somewhat limiting right now.
Yeah, and stats are never going to be perfect, and they're never going to tell the whole story. But I do think there is some frustration, like with this front seven. I think people I've been going at Gervon Dexter, and I think one thing that people just need to appreciate is this guy is going to, at this rate, play more snaps than any defensive tackle has played in the SEC that has been charted. Nope. Nobody's played more snaps. He's on pace to break the SEC defensive tackle snap record, which is insane.
And there's rumors that he's like doing this hurt as well. Like he's got an injury as well. So
Yeah.
like and that kind of all tracks.
Yeah. And his numbers in the first half are pretty good. He's getting, I think like 8% pressure, almost 9% in the first half. And then, second half is just sub replacement level. And, he's eating double teams like crazy out there. And it's just not that sustainable. He's out there, I think he's doing 53 snaps a game.
Oof.
The highest last year, I think, was like 42 snaps per game by a DT. So, he's already played 2+ extra games through the season compared to one of these guys.
I think even crazier than that. Like that's nuts. But then like Des Watson's getting a lot of snaps too.
Yeah, here's Dez is here. He's getting 30+, which is nuts at his size.
That's right. The average was 27, right?
Yeah, and it varies a little bit like on the depth chart. So like
Yeah.
27, like a lot of teams rotate really heavy, so they don't have many guys getting, plus, not many guys are breaking 40, not many guys are breaking, you don't have your DT2 breaking 30 very often.
But Big Dez is one of them.
Yeah. Where we're struggling is like these 4th, 5th, and 6th linemen. We don't have those tackles to rotate out. And I mean, it's showing. So I think people are hoping Chris McClellan can be that guy. I know his snap count's been going up every game. So
yeah, he's played well in spurts. When I went to practice in the spring, I thought he flashed a couple times and made some plays. So, being a true freshman coming in, and I think he's from Oklahoma, right? So it's not like he was playing in a football hotbed in high school.
Yeah.
So it takes some time to get kind of up to the level, but he's been playing well in his limited snaps. And like you said, seems to be more and more and more. Maybe he can be that second or third guy by the time the year's over.
Yeah.
And if he is, that gives you a little more hope for the future.
Special teams, a little interesting, just kind of special teams blurb, because I know this has been another thing people have harped on. So, I think this was post Tennessee when I made this. And one of the things is, we have one of the worst starting field positions at that time on kickoffs. and you can get that up by fair catching it more. But if you actually want to be a team that starts in plus territory, we were fair catching it about the right amount, right? You want to fair catch about 50 to 60% of the balls. You want a fair catch to get in this plus, you want to be on this plus side of this line here. But our problem was our return yards were really bad. So, they were below average. And then when you combine that with penalties and probably bad decisions on when to return them, that's our bad starting field position.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, we just need to fair catch more. It was that we were being not smart with the ones we were fair catching, not really averaging that many return yards, and then penalties. So, ideally we would have been starting in plus field position given our return yards, but given our fair catch rate. But we were just really poor execution, not necessarily poor game plan.
Yeah, I think there is like an edge. I also cover USF, and they've had, they've made a lot of hay the last couple of years. They had the All-American kick returner last year just by returning as many as possible.
Yeah.
You're not going to pop every one, but you'll pop a few, because I just don't think teams practice it as much, especially with it's easier to kind of hit touchbacks now. So I don't think a ton of teams practice coverage a ton. Yeah. So I think there's an edge to be had there, but like you said, you got to take the right ones out. And when we saw that this past week in LSU, you take the right ones out, you got a chance to do something.
All right.
that's you kind of got to take those out. So that's got to be better decision making, not necessarily that we will take it out, but when to take it out. So
Yeah, it's just execution. And I think we've seen that the past few weeks. I think the decision making's been better. We haven't seen as many penalties. We've gotten some plus. So
yeah, the one to start the LSU game was, I mean, 3 plays, you score a touchdown, including that kickoff return. That helps you quite a bit. And that's the other part for the offense in some of these early games where they're playing so poorly. I mean, the field position was terrible in some of these early games, and they kind of were. There's a few where they're able to drive it down the field and kind of still score with the tough field position. I think as that improves, I think it'll be easier for the offense. But what we're kind of wrapping up here. What are kind of your general expectations going forward? Florida's 4-3 right now. I think. What are you thinking? Bowl game for sure, or what are your thoughts?
I think we can get to a bowl game. I mean, 7 has always been the number I've wanted this year. I think 7's still in play, but it's gotten less likely. So I think feel good about Vandy, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. I think we win all those. Texas A&M less sure about. FSU is going to be tough. It's sad to say. I think Georgia is going to be probably really hard to watch. But then it's all expectations.
What's most important for you? Just style of play, or just not necessarily wins. What do you kind of want to see?
The main things I'm looking for are if I see accurate passing from Anthony Richardson in the back half of this season, and he doesn't get drafted, then I have a lot more hope for next year.
Yeah, I told somebody before the season started, I thought Florida's the best case scenario for Florida is that you win 8 or 9 games, and then all the games you lose, Richardson's really bad.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm fine if he has a dud game in Jacksonville when everybody's watching,
and then you bring him back. So I think he's seems to be on track for that, or he's had some really good games, but then he's had some duds that maybe would cause him to kind of get the information. Hey, maybe you need one more year. But
yeah, I've got 2 friends that do the analytics for drafts, and started the year after that Utah game right at the top, and now it's in free fall, and I haven't seen it level out yet. With everybody's got question marks on if he's going to get drafted, and if so, where. So I think it gives Florida the best shot if we can get him back next year. And then have time to develop another QB for that year 3, year 4 push. Yeah.
I think that is the best case scenario for Florida next year. So, if Florida's going to lose, you almost want Richardson to play really bad. So
yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to see Richardson play, throw some accurate balls. I'd love. We're doing decent at generating pressure. Our sacks are really bad. It'd be nice to get a few more sacks. It'd be nice to have third down luck flip a little bit.
Go 30%, go 35% on third down defensively in one game. That would be cool, right?
Yeah. Just basically be on the other side of some of the bum luck.
Yeah, what's interesting is you will get, and that's what obviously makes football so fun, is you'll get times where teams are terrible on third downs all year, and then one game somebody goes, 1 for 11, and that's where you get these tight games out of nowhere. So
yeah.
There's the recipe to beat Georgia right there. Make them go 1 for 11 on third downs. And
it could happen, man. College football is weird.
You got a shot. They're working on it on the bye week, I'm sure. Well, Bud, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you and find all this? Because this is kind of stuff you put out all the time. This wasn't just kind of a special ordered by me here. This is stuff you're putting out, info you put out on Twitter and other places all the time. So where can people find you?
Yeah, J. Bud Davis at Twitter. So
there you go. Follow him. If you're not following him and you watch this, you need to rectify that immediately. Bud, thank you so much for coming on and as always bringing the goods.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun to get to talk about it, man.
Yep.